This hour of broadcasting brought to you by TwoWayRadioCenter.com, a Motorola value-added reseller. Church Safety Guys. Welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys. Brought to you by Vigilant Impact. The Church Safety Guys is a non-profit organization dedicated to equipping the vigilant, those men and women who stand watch, keeping our houses of worship and places of faith safe. We believe church safety and security must be a ministry first and have engaged, servant leaders who continually strive for excellence and teams of motivated volunteers that are always training. Join us for the next hour as the Church Safety Guys unpack safety, security, leadership, and ministry operations with your hosts, Dr. James McGarvey and Mike Scully. This broadcast is also available on YouTube, your favorite podcast platforms, churchsafetyguys.com, and on the original Church Security app. Download it today. Feel free to like, subscribe, and share with your ministry.
Hello and welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys. I am James and I am joined on this fine evening with none other than my co-host, Mike Scully.
What's up, Doc?
How's it going, Mike? How are you doing today?
Good. It's a long birthday weekend, so I appreciate the folks that gave the shout out in the group, and it was good to kind of have some time with the family, get away to dinner, things like that. So another year older, and certainly some days in pulling duty, you feel it more than others, of course. So,
you're still a spring chicken.
Oh yeah, halfway to something.
Turn of the century. No, never mind.
No, not quite that. Not quite that half.
My son asked me that yesterday. He's like, he kind of looked at me and I could see he was deep in thought. And I said, okay, bud, what are you thinking about so intently? And he's like, aren't you like a half a century old?
Oh gosh.
And I'm like, okay, I'm going to stop you right there.
All right. Not quite yet. Dial that back.
But it's good stuff. Well, hopefully everything will go well with this recording and broadcast. We try and do everything live and not pre-recorded, but I am in the middle of the Smoky Mountains right now in Tennessee, and I'd say live on location. You can see my background's a little bit different for those watching, but
just a little bit.
Just a tiny bit. I was trying to figure out how I could hang a CSG logo up there. I didn't pack that, but yeah, we took a little bit of a weekend break, and one of my favorite spots is when I get a chance is to go down to Pigeon Forge in Gatlinburg, and it's just real nice and quiet, and it's relaxing until I remember that I can't stand Tennessee drivers. So
it's a good spot for writing. I mean, we do have just a few number of books on the backlog. So I know that we're deep into those. So
yeah, no, I don't know. We're going to get to those at some point. I keep saying at some point. But yeah, it would be fun. Actually, the weather this trip has been gorgeous, so it's been good. I haven't really had time to sit down and work on that, but
enjoy it while you can, because enjoy the good weather while you can, because you're a couple of weeks away from coming down to Texas, which Texas is closer to the sun than the rest of the country, so we're a bit hotter. I think we're at day
bigger in Texas.
It is. I think we're at day 44 in a row of over 100 degrees. So it's it may be a bit hot for you.
I'm sure I'll survive.
All right. So you'll be here, and that'll be for the let me get the acronym right. The National Organization of Church Security and Safety Management Conference.
Correct.
So
yes, that is actually going to be in Dallas, and it will be August 13th. And Mike and I actually will both be. Church Safety Guys is one of the sponsors for that conference. And so we're going to have a table set up, and we'll have some resources there. And it's kind of nice. I'm looking forward to it for two reasons. First reason is anytime I get to hang out with Mike, it's usually a good time. And the second reason is we've already had folks reach out to us and say they wanted to come and hang out with us, which is great. I love getting a chance anytime we have the opportunity to talk to folks and talk to churches. And it's actually gonna be at the Watermark Church in Dallas, Texas. And so I think there's still tickets available. You can go online, check out through our website at churchsafetyguys.com. And if you click on the training link, that will take you to their site to purchase tickets, and you should be in good shape if you want to come down and join us for that. But we are doing a little bit of a presentation, about a 20-minute presentation over lunch, and we're going to talk about ministry and resources and things like that. But there's some great speakers lined up, and definitely some great information, and certainly resources for you guys. So you definitely don't want to miss it. But
and if you're just hearing about it, if you're just hearing about it for the first time, is go back to our replay from the last couple of weeks. We did have Chuck on from NOC SSM, and he kind of detailed and kind of talked through some of the great guests that he has speaking. And as James said, we'll be sponsoring. So look forward to meeting you if you make it out that way down to Dallas, or up to Dallas in my case.
For sure. And as always, before we jump into the topic for this broadcast, you can reach out to us through our website, which is churchsafetyguys.com, or reach out to us through the Church Security app. And you can download that free on the Google and iOS stores. And let us know. Like we do this for you guys. So if there's a particular topic that maybe we haven't covered, or maybe a guest that you'd like us to have back on to talk to, certainly let us know. And we usually try and plan things out a couple months in advance, but sometimes we can switch stuff around, and we're here to help you all. So if we can key up a topic and talk about it and bring awareness to a particular subject, then we like doing that. We love doing that and taking the opportunity. So
absolutely.
So for this podcast, I started thinking about it, and I wanted to bring in some folks that one that we've had before and you guys are familiar with, and then also a new gentleman that's volunteered to put up with our nonsense for the evening. But one of my things is I love going into the trenches and just kind of talking about successes, opportunities, and fun and challenges and that sort of thing for church safety teams. And I know sometimes, like, when we do the broadcast, we're always talking about best practices and how to do things better. But sometimes I know people are like, do you guys have weird stories too? Do you deal with stuff? And we don't always have time to bring it up for the sake of the show, because we try and keep it around an hour. But Tonight is that night. This is that broadcast, and I was trying to name it Real Stories of the Highway Patrol. I was going to, and I was going to try and key up that 90s soundtrack, but I couldn't find a decent soundtrack and whatnot. So, but I'll bring our folks in here. So we're going to welcome Jared back, and then also Matt Perkins. So thanks, guys, for joining us and putting up with us on this broadcast.
Thanks for having me.
You're on mute there, Jared. Welcome back.
Starting off with a bang.
Yeah.
For sure. So we can definitely, we'll go around the room, but for folks that maybe don't, everybody knows Jared. He hangs out with us all the time, but so we'll jump to Matt. So Matt, for those that don't know, if you could just kind of go through your experience and where you're at with church safety and that sort of thing for us.
Excellent. My background for this realm, day job, cybersecurity. So that's kind of where my background comes from, technology there. But in this realm, I was 9 years Sheriff's Department search and rescue and DPS air rescue. So I've done the backcountry, the dive rescue, the mountain rescue, the leading technical, the jumping out of helicopters to get people, all that stuff in backcountry. And that kind of led into church security. So I've got 14 years with a couple different churches of church security, whether it be leading teams, helping build ministry, running the different parts of the ministry, or executive protection, pastoral security. So all the different aspects of it is of that realm as well. So just a few years tucked in there.
That's great.
For sure. For sure. I want to hear more about that at some point in time. We'll have to have you back on because I want to hear more about the jumping out of planes bit. But
I was going to say the same thing. I was like, you know what? I can't say I've ever rappelled out of a helicopter in my lifetime. So
yeah. When you're many miles from civilization, somebody's stuck. That's the fastest way to get to them.
Yep, makes sense.
Good stuff. We used to when I lived in California, I worked with the sheriff's office for a little bit, and we used to do stuff with search and rescue all the time. But our folks in Southern California, mostly the folks we worked with was mostly the horse group. So like, if somebody was out and we could get to them on the mountains, then we would take the horses out, and it was always a lot of fun. But it sounds like I'm sure you've got some great stories in there, but
many.
I was waiting for you to cue like some tumbleweed graphic or something when you're talking about horses and sheriff's department.
Well, I'm sure, when you're in the desert area, whether it's Arizona or Southern California, you end up, when you're dealing with the sheriff's office, you have to wear the flexibility hat, and you do multiple things all the time. So
yes,
it's kind of, but there's plenty of tumbleweed for sure.
So I'm going to kick it off, and let's jump right into the our first kind of round robin, if you will, and kind of say, let's go with most interesting story, and I'll leave it as kind of a security leader's choice as to what makes it the most interesting. But let's yield the floor to our guest first. Matt, why don't you kick us off?
Ooh, this is a little bit of a long one, but it's good. It was complex a number of years ago when I first started, so there were definitely some lessons learned from it. So that's where it's a great one as well. We were stretched pretty thin, and this was for a recovery ministry at one of the churches that I was serving at the time, and I was the only one there. So again, stretched very thin, and got a call from the children's group that one of the preschoolers was turning blue. So immediately it's medical, you worry, but I was the only one there. Got there, color was back, child was responding, things were okay there, and then noticed a surgical scar on the chest, in the upper spot. Of course, that kind of raised some windows,
sure,
and raised some eyes. Tried getting hold of the mom that had checked the child in. No go. Mom had left campus and dropped off the child. We ended up getting hold of an aunt that was actually on campus and found out that this preschooler was a recent open heart patient. and had surgery. And some of the wires that were used to bound chests together sometimes poke and bother her. So she would hold her breath until she passed out, sometimes even. So a lot of medical, scary situations there, scary things. Young child, mother had left campus, dropped her off, got a hold of mother. She had gone and was partaking in some things that probably shouldn't have been happening at the time, but ended up coming to campus and refusing treatment. So it was a very difficult situation. And as somebody new into it, didn't assert as we probably should have to, this is a child, this is a minor, regardless if you're here and refusing service, we need to have medical dispatched, period, and turn this over to EMS. So that was a big learning point for a very scary situation that, thank goodness, turned out okay. Followed up, child was fine, everything was fine, everything went well, but may not have. So
Yeah.
definitely a learning situation for the ministry itself, for the children's ministry when those things happen and people check in, and for myself as a security individual to know, hey, it's okay to assert and say we need to call regardless sometimes.
And I would guess is in many situations, I know there's a lot of times our children's ministries and will inform the parents and kind of say, hey, use your judgment on things like sickness and all these, make sure you haven't thrown up in 24 hours or more, or 48 before you bring your kid into the kids ministry. But I very much doubt there's any language in most of our boilerplates that refer to, hey, if you just had recent surgery and there's a medical condition we should be aware of, you should kind of disclose or at least let us know, let alone leaving campus. So the whole leaving campus is even the frosting on the cake there. But even just being aware of a potential medical condition, post-surge, things like that they had. Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, that was a rough one.
It's hard too, because to Mike's point, and I know you guys all would agree, but there's a certain liability that's assumed on the part of the church to handle the child in the best interest of the child, medically and otherwise, and do a certain level of due diligence. And it's hard because a lot of times, like Mike said, that's not spoken. So when you're juggling and you're trying to balance out, okay, at what point do we make that decision and take full responsibility for what's going on and do that. And I think for us, like we've had similar situations to that, Matt, too, where we're just like, okay, you know what, if mom leaves campus, and that's what I tell people all the time, if the adult or if the guardian isn't on campus, guess what, all bets are off. We're in charge, and this is how we're going to handle it until we can, get mom or dad there. And we actually had a situation last year where dad was off campus, mom was on campus. Mom came over and saw the medical emergency that her son was having and started turning pale and having a medical emergency herself because of what was going on. And I decided at that point, look, you're not in a condition to take your son to the hospital and drive him because you're passing out yourself. So we're going to step in and we're going to say, hey, let's call 911 and get an ambulance here for your safety and your boy's safety. So sometimes, I don't know, sometimes you can find yourself in unique situations like that too, where it's like, okay, we're going to do what's best for everybody. And I took fire for that. I had an individual come up to me and say, well, that wasn't necessary to call an ambulance. And I said, well, you know what? You weren't there at that moment. I made the judgment call and I stand by my decision. So water under the bridge. But yeah, every situation you certainly, you learn and try and do things better next time.
Yes,
for sure.
Yeah, it amazes me how many parents will drop their children off at, some sort of childcare that is intended for the program you're hosting on campus, and instead take their opportunity for date night, and you're trying to page them and you're trying to find them, and they are, miles away.
What? Date night? That never happens. What are you talking about, Jared?
Cheap childcare.
Yeah. I will say during VBS, absolutely, that's a date night. But when I'm not staffing it, that's a date night. But on a regular morning or even another piece or service, that's not a time to leave campus and leave them stranded. So Jared, why don't you take the next spot in your most interesting story?
It's such a tough one to pull out. They're not full stories, but having a night of worship and driving behind the worship center and hearing a car running and flashing a light on, and there was an individual lacking clothing in his own back seat. He jumped up in the front seat and went tearing out of there. So that was not what I expected in the back parking lot during night of worship. But we encouraged our especially our female staff members, could you not park in the darkest part of the back of the church parking lot? We had, but probably one of the more interesting ones we had was Super Bowl Sunday. A gentleman came in, sat down in the front row, big guy. And as soon as the pastor came out, we had a guest pastor that day. He got up and he immediately exited out the side door, which was right next to the stage. And so our security on the front went out and contacted him as he was violently shaking a tree that we had just planted out in the front yard. Fortunately, I had a newer guy on the team. He had no security background whatsoever. Just a big realtor with a big heart who liked to talk to people. And so probably the only guy on campus that was bigger than the one who just stormed out of the worship center during the sermon. And so we were able to get him isolated. He was armed with a pocket knife, and he started telling us all about the visions and the prophecies that he had received on top of one of the local mountains during the thunderstorm. And he was there to share it with Bill, our lead pastor, because he wanted to offload the burden of all these prophecies. So Chris, our realtor, continues talking to him while we've got a retired police officer keeping an eye on the situation. And ultimately, for about a month, anytime we had any thunderstorms, which it was during monsoon season, he'd call and share the latest prophecy. And but it was funny when I did the debrief with Chris, he goes, Jared, I didn't really know if he had any weapons, and I was kind of nervous, but I wanted to keep him talking. So I just asked him, can I give you a hug? And when I hugged him, I kind of like felt to see if I felt any weapons. Is that okay? I go, Chris, that's awesome. The fact you figured that out and nobody told you to do it, great job, no problem. So, yeah, that was that. We had a crisis team en route, but he left before the crisis team could get there. The other funny part about that story was we actually isolated him around the back of a building, and there's an emergency exit from our kids area. And so while we're engaging with this guy who is clearly in an altered mental state, had a giant pocket knife that Chris had not been able to disarm him of, and one of our children's workers opened the back door to throw out her coffee on the grass. And so my law enforcement officer, my retired chief, he looks at her, he goes, you need to go back inside. And just as nice and fun child worker loving as she could, she said, well, is there something going on? I mean, literally 8 feet away from her, she's exposed our kids to this guy who's having a mental breakdown. And she thought it was a good time to, ask how things are going. So always a good time.
Yeah. Wow. That's a good one. James, you want to go?
It's kind of hard to top any of that, but I don't know. When we first started our team, when we were deciding, we're in the middle of deciding if we needed a team or not. We had an individual that came in, and he was a homeless kid, and he went up and was sitting near the front of the church, and during the altar call by our senior pastor, he jumped up a couple of times and was kind of pacing back and forth, and then he'd go up to pray and then go back to his seat. And so he made a move, like a few folks were watching him, a few of the deacons were watching him, and he made a move towards the pastor that was kind of like an aggressive, like, lunge in a sense. And so they grabbed him, kind of hooked under his arm and let him out. And they were outside, and somebody, he started kind of resisting once he was outside the building. And I think what happened was, I think later we found out he was special needs and was kind of autistic and didn't completely understand what was going on. But at one point in time, one of the individuals kept saying, "You need to sit down," and kept like pushing his shoulder back to have him sit down on the sidewalk. And then somebody else came out and said, "Hey, we need to call 911." And so one of the other ladies that was there ran inside to a safety team member and said, "Go call 911." And the safety team member kind of looked at everything and said, "Well, I'm not scheduled today, so I'm not going to," and turned around and walked away. And so then eventually someone called 911, and the police got there, and they put him in the cruiser and gave him a ride and basically kind of de-escalated everything. So there was a lot of stuff that just went wrong. They didn't need to touch him. Yes. I think he was probably misperceived with going for the pastor. There wasn't really anything entirely aggressive with that, but they didn't need to push him and have him keep sitting down on the sidewalk. If he wanted to leave the property, he could have left the property, and that would have been fine. Crisis averted. He's not on the property anymore. He's not, there's not a concern. So we kind of had to step in, and basically it pushed us. And like Matt said earlier, it was definitely a learning opportunity for us at that point, because we said, we need to have a team, especially, but beyond that, we also need to train folks so that they can respond. And then we had to circle back around and say, okay, what about all of this? I'm not scheduled, so I'm not going to help out, and call 911 type thing. Calling 911 isn't solely the responsibility of someone scheduled for that service. It was one of those opportunities that just revealed to us that we had a lot of work to do. And, we kind of rolled up our sleeves and tried to address it accordingly. And, it was what it is. But, after 15 years, I think all of us have some pretty interesting stories, but I thought that was kind of interesting. So I'll throw it over to Mike. It's your turn. Go for it.
All right. Well, I've told a little bit of this story, I think, in a spot or two before, but it really is, I feel like, the one that kind of jumped out in my mind when I was starting to think about tonight's show. And so we had this couple, and they didn't look like your typical couple. In other words, they weren't like kind of coming in together as that couple, and they came in and split up. So by itself, that's no big deal, but they started really kind of what looked like really kind of checking everything out. They're looking at the ceiling. They're looking at inside different. Is this door unlocked? Is this that? So it really felt like, okay, they could either be complete green beans, first time there, and they're just checking things out, or they're a little off. So we thought, okay, is this a potentially a mental health issue? But why are they splitting up? Why are they in different spots? Well, we found out that the gentleman ends up found his way into the auditorium early before we actually posted and opened the doors. So now we're like, okay, what is this guy doing? Because the behavior just was not normal, but not anything to the point where it was so threatening, like that we're super nervous, but enough where we're like, okay, why is he in here? So now we're like kind of checking, doing a sweep in the auditorium, make sure that, nothing's going on, because he's the only one in there. He's not talking to himself, not doing any of that stuff. So we're like, okay, where's the woman? Where is she at? Okay, so we're trying to track down her location. So we're on the radio, try to find out where she is. Well, come to find out, she's kind of hanging around outside our kids' church area. And so at the time, she's sitting there and she's kind of looking at things, and she's watching the check-in process. She's watching other parents come in, and we didn't see a kid anywhere come in with them for first off. We didn't see at any point a kid with them near the kids area. But then we noticed as she's picked up on the fact that a couple of our team members noticed her and started looking at her a little bit, she started walking the other direction. Well, what I noticed as she's starting to walk away is she's got a kid's backpack on her shoulder. Something I didn't pick up on the doorway in when I was first noticing her, but she's carrying a kid's backpack and no kid to be found. And I'm like, so what's going on here? Why is that? Talk to my kids church lead and kind of try to understand is, hey, did this person drop off a kid? Was she in here? Did she? No, but she was asking a whole lot of questions, and we just had to work with the other parents who had kids here. Okay, so you didn't see a kid? No, I didn't see a kid. So now, of course, all the red flags are going up. They feel like they're kind of casing the place. They've split up in different opportunities. She's got a backpack, and she's hanging out near the kids' church area without a kid. So we didn't know what the purpose was ultimately with that. Fast forward, of course, it brought in the entire team. We really were kind of like, okay, keep an eye on this woman. Hey, you keep an eye on the gentleman who's inside service already. Try to understand, are there two scenarios here? What's their motive? Is this about kids? Is it not about kids? Well, we ended up having somebody kind of reach out and kind of talk to the gentleman, sat down next to him just to kind of see, hey, it was the first time at church. And later on, we had somebody talk with the woman. The behavior kind of tempered down after that point once they actually saw that we were watching. It still was really odd. Again, sent all the signals up. But we found out in the weeks following, because they did come back, no child any given time there. But in the future times, they didn't bring the kid's backpack. Well, it turns out that I guess they were actually homeless, and the backpack was part of their only thing they had. And so it just happened to be a kid's backpack, but that is what really caused us to have that attention. So really kind of a moment that kind of said, hey, we're condition orange here, not as in a threat, but hey, this person could be looking to try to take a kid and have the bag as either what's in the bag, and or this is a way to either smoke screen and make it look like it's normal for her to be pulling a kid out, or what. So there was a lot there, and we kind of unpacked and tabletopped it after, really from a standpoint in saying what was the number one thing we could have done sooner was just get somebody just greeting her. And that was really the difference there. And it wasn't like we weren't a busy morning already. So we were stretched somewhat thin. We were split, sending somebody off to check in the auditorium. We were still trying to keep our posts as the service is flowing in. So in a way, it is what that was. But I think in tabletopping after, that's where we would have said, you know what, that while we still made contact with both parties, we should have made that contact sooner as a team.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting as all these four of these stories, James, you didn't really have a team, formally stood up yet. Matt was the only guy there. Mike, you're going, it's busy and we're trying to tend to it, but there's 1,000 other things. What we found in the story that I told was that you can have a team and feel like you're fully staffed, and just one critical incident comes up. Your goal should to be able to handle 2 critical incidents and continue to have services going on. And that seems like a really lofty goal, but man, as soon as something pops off, I don't care if you've got 8 spots and 9 people, you're going to feel like you're understaffed and underprepared.
100%. And I think that's a bigger piece to you're kind of bringing up a point that is really about, I think, team maturity. And it's that progression of being responsive all the way to the point of being adaptable. And that's that degree of maturity that as you stretch your teams and you get to that ability to not just understand different scenarios and how to respond, but being able to be flexible and understand, okay, I know something's going on over there. It hasn't risen to the level where I have to involve myself or leave my post. I'm going to hear about it later. I don't need to get involved. And that's the maturity level that teaching those teams, because then they remain flexible and adaptable to then flex to the next opportunity.
We had a situation to that point, Jared. We had a situation, I think it was a couple years ago, where a car leaving one of the services was T-boned by another car out in the street across, in front of our church, basically. And I called it in and asked, our folks to call 911, and I went over to see if everybody was okay. And I turned around and there's like 6, 7 people outside, like all of my safety team is outside watching. And I'm like, okay, so you go here, you do this, you 3 go back inside, you're in charge, you make sure nothing happens between now and, the next 15 minutes that we officially dismiss, because this person left a little bit early. But yeah, you're right on. And that forced us to say, okay, how do we need to handle it? And I went back and I apologized. And I said, look, guys, I called people out, but part of this is, when we talked about it again, part of this is my fault, because I should have said, I want this person and this person, and let everybody stay at their post and everybody wanted to see, and we had part of the road blocked off. And so, I mean, it's a good learning experience all around. But yeah, I think if you can put it together and keep that, running 2 incidents and have the manpower to do that and the maturity to say, okay, we're gonna look at this from a whole perspective. I'll find out later I don't need to respond. Then I think that's a good place to be, for sure.
Yep.
For sure. All right. So next question for tonight, and I'll throw it over to Matt. What would you say your favorite training is or was?
Force on force training that we've been doing. I know people hear force on force and they're like, oh, you're beating each other up. No, not necessarily force on force. The way it's been done is scenarios. So groups with different stations with different scenarios, and the scenarios are actually real life scenarios that have taken places in organizations and churches all over the country. And just running them through with live people from that ministry at that station as the actors and participants, and with the safety and security team as the respondents. That has been, in all my years, that has been the biggest way to project the positivity and the necessity of the ministry to everybody within the church and within those different ministries, and see how it reacts, see how it goes, as well as bring up different scenarios and bring up different responses to the individuals on the safety and security team. So that's been just fabulous.
For sure. For sure. Jared, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we're getting ready to do our 3rd scenario-based force-on-force training tomorrow, and it's the response has been great, and as Matt said, involving other people, whether it volunteers or staff from other departments, has been huge on getting buy-in. And whether you've got fancy equipment and it's airsoft or laser tag or just a finger gun, putting people in situations where they can experience some of that stress inoculation, as I like to call it.
Yep.
We had kids workers and youth workers in our last round that said, well, that was crazy. I knew it was all fake, and I knew it was okay, and I knew I was going to be all right, and my heart's still racing. And I went, that's awesome, because the next time that you're in a stressful situation, your body's going to respond slightly less, dramatically or drastically. And so, and as Matt alluded, we've written our scenarios based on 90% of them are based on things that have happened in our church or in our network here in Phoenix. And so to be able to tell people that as they act through and they see things play out is so much better than a lecture format, because they're experiencing what could happen, and then also they're really getting a chance to see the expertise, that they're not just guys that like to stand in the corner and stare at people and wear an earpiece, which anybody who's ever had an earpiece in for very long knows nobody wants to wear those earpieces.
Yep. For sure. As I have one in my ear now, just for the show.
So, Mike, what's your favorite training?
Well, I'm going to kind of break with the pattern here, and there's kind of two. I'd say internally, I've enjoyed the ones where I've involved kind of the kids ministry side of things, with the concern that some threat or risk, kidnapping, etc., was occurring within that wing. And I feel that just as a scenario that it felt more real, because again, as a dad of little kids, it took that stress level even higher. And so I know our scenarios are meant to draw that out of us, but I felt like that was really the best scenario. But for the real meat of this one, I think I'm going to go down the path of really kind of the training I've had to take to kind of, invest in my skills as a leader and draw out different things. So I had a chance to do a 3-day training with Sheepdog Response, a big company that's based here in Central Texas. And the real good part about it was both the firearms ability on the range, but we also did some hand-to-hand. So we did some rolling and some jiu-jitsu level moves and some weapon retention and other sorts of things that, all of that stuff, when you're being tackled on a mat and you're trying to hold that weapon in and still gain control, that mindset of, control the weapon, get better position, and do damage. If you're in that umpteen fight and a weapon's out, that's your goal. You control that weapon, get better position on the person, and do whatever damage you have to do, because you may not get another opportunity to do it. And really that succinct moniker has stuck with me really well out of that training. But 3 days of getting beat up, and I literally bruises for weeks after that one. But that was the stress inoculation. We found the point where we had to tap. Okay, we were truly struggling, and we were fighting each other to the point where not trying to hurt each other, but we were really trying to give each other a fight. And so I felt like that was a training that took it to a level that was beyond most trainings. Most trainings, you get gold nuggets, you walk away with things that you've tuned up or you get better at, but you really don't push that envelope so hard that you realize, oh, that's where. Or, oh, that's where I should have done this or should have done that. Or I'm not going to do that again because that hurt.
Yeah, I think, and honestly, my thoughts are the same as what you guys all mentioned. But I think probably my favorite training has been when we do an active shooter drill in our church with our team. There's usually two or three local departments that we do it with, and we run through drills, and they're gracious enough to allow our folks to interact with the officers and kind of learn, but also understand how officers respond when they're faced with that. But it's so funny because the trainer and I are really good friends, but he'll come up to me, the police officer trainer, he'll come up to me and he'll say, "Hey, do you want to shake it up, or do you want to keep it kind of low, low key, even keel?" And I'm like, "Shake it up, man." And so they actually, I think it was a couple of years ago, they stuck me in one, and I was responding, and they threw me a curveball, and that was, we were responding to our main auditorium, main sanctuary that seats about 1,500 people, and it was a teenager. And in my mind, with it became very real to me, because responding and assuming that it was an active shooter and someone that I would need to address with lethal force at that point, that just kind of blew my mind and a lot of other people, because I wasn't expecting to have a teenager teenager with a firearm there. I was expecting an adult, a male, something else. And so we really took that moment and sat down and said, okay, let's, this is realistic, and let's talk about this. We build up in our minds, we build so many times perceptions of how things will play out or how they should. And that doesn't mean that it's always going to be that way. So having kind of an open mind and having the stress inoculation, but at the same time also realizing that, we also need to be clear and clear-minded and wise with how we respond, because that situation and instance can change in a moment. We need to be prepared for whatever we come across. So to me, that was kind of a cool thing for sure.
That's great.
For sure.
We'll go to our third and final. I know we're running tight on time here. Maybe we can get through this and get all four of us in here. So I'd say, I know we each talked about things we learned from our most interesting scenarios. And really we talked about things we learned or enjoyed or put out in our trainings that we did. But I guess let's look at it one step further. What was the biggest opportunity? Where was that aha moment of something that really changed how you approach this ministry, changed how you approach the leadership of your team, changed tactically or procedurally something in a big way over the course of the last 14, 15 years that we each have been doing this?
Well, I can jump out there with one.
All right.
I'll throw one in. Kind of tying off some of the things you had said, Mike, with the children's. We had a situation at a night of worship for high schoolers and junior hires where there was a little bit of a disturbance between an adult female and a junior high female. And in addressing it and talking with them, the adult female was trying to get the youth to leave with them. And she's like, I don't want to go. And the adult female was saying, it's my daughter. We're leaving, and was forcibly trying to take her. And the daughter was acknowledged, yeah, it's my mom, but I don't want to go. And learning opportunity, putting all the things in, okay, let's de-escalate. Let's try and talk to them. Let's try and separate them. That didn't work. The mom was very, very aggressive, but trusting the gut and saying, yeah, something doesn't feel right here. Yes, it's a mom. Yes, it's the mom. Yes, it's been acknowledged it's the mom, but something doesn't feel right. In further addressing, found out it was a non-custodial parent. We had law enforcement involved. We escalated it up. Turns out the beat sergeant was very familiar with the situation when it was escalated up and they arrived. And this mom had been trying to take that child for quite a while, and knew they went to church there, found out there was a night of worship, and went to try and take advantage of the situation. And had we not, and that was a great opportunity to talk with the team and say, hey, this is all the things we've talked about. If something feels wrong, address it. Like with my earlier story, address it when something's off and actually follow up. It could have gone really bad, but all those things we had put in place that we actually followed through with worked. So that was a great lessons learned.
Good one.
Yeah. I think, the biggest learning opportunity really came in the last month for us. And that was, we were in the middle of worship. We had just worked with the production and worship team and live stream team on what to do in case of a service disruption. Really thinking more of like protesters or something to that effect. But during worship, a lady just started screaming. So the lights are down, the music's up, and a lady just starts screaming. And as I reviewed the tape, you can see the ripple of panic kind of move throughout the room. Now it turned out it was a 10-year-old who had just passed out, and the mom was just in a panic. What also turned out was within 30 seconds, people were fleeing the building, claiming there was everything from a man with a gun, an active shooter, a bomb. Got a report that one lady ran out screaming there was a snake. It's as if the panic induced was manifested in everybody's worst nightmare. And so within a minute, we had the kid getting medical attention. My safety and security lead on campus that day, because I happened to be off, such great luck, was on stage announcing it's a medical emergency. There's no danger. There's no threat. But it was unbelievable to watch how quickly something can happen, to watch how people are going to respond, especially in light of the high the tensions in our society. And we had the kids area went into lockdown within 45 seconds. And there were still parents that were able to breach that children's area in less than 45 seconds. And so there were 100 different things that came out of it. 95 of them were how proud I was of our team of professionals, both on staff and on the safety and security team. And there were about 5 things that we're going to go, let's make some small adjustments. Let's make some small tweaks so that if, God forbid, something like that were ever to happen, we're that much more ready to do it. And so, but watching people panic, how quickly things can absolutely come off the rails, and just the human response in that moment was eye-opening. So I've done a couple of presentations on it, and I'm kind of working on how much of our security footage we share in that presentation. But it was just a fascinating exercise, and I think really insightful for where we're at and how quickly things can go. I think everybody thinks, as James talked about, you kind of you have this perception of how things are going to go. If this happens, it's going to look like this. If this happens, I'm going to do that. And in the moment, 40 seconds, and it was absolute pandemonium. And restoring order after that was a challenge, but I think it's a challenge we rose to really well. And it's nice to go, all that work you put in paid off, and now we've just got some minor adjustments to make to be better next time.
It's very interesting, Jared, that we know the human body with the human brain versus lizard brain and so forth often go into a cycle of that deliberation before they actually act. And so the fact that within 45 seconds, you not only had folks not just stuck in their own deliberation of, do I do something, do I not? But they not only acted and were actually evacuating, but they were making up and hearing stories, and it was creating that telephone tag situation in such a short period of time. You picture more that everybody's freezing because they don't know what to do, because it's kind of like, oh my gosh, the screaming and the this, the that. But in reality, it was, again, to your point, because of the state of the world we're in, because of the things we see on the news, panic just sets in for some of these people, and it turns into a flight mechanism. Mm-hmm. And so now they're just making up things in their head to justify their reason for that flight, i.e. leaving the building.
Yeah, it was really, really interesting. It was early on. It was nobody actually heard any shots. I'm sure nobody said there was an active shooter. And I did dozens of interviews as the week went on, and out all 4 sides of the building. All of those things were reported that quickly. Just fascinating. But talk about having buy-in from the congregation for having safety and security professionals. We're kind of in a sweet spot right now. People are glad we're there. So
crank that budget up, brother.
Exactly.
You get the opportunity, you drive a truck through it.
Right. Yeah, I think that's why we've literally tomorrow night for our scenario-based training, we have twice as many people signed up as we had at the one we did in January. So it's kind of a high risk, high reward. Yeah, just to be able to pull it off right. But we got a great team. So yeah, you strike when the iron's hot so that people are interested and bought into being prepared.
Absolutely.
Good stuff.
James, do you want to go quick?
I'm gonna jump on what Matt said. We had a similar situation, only it was with a grandparent and a child, and the grandparent was trying to have the child go with them and check the child out, and then we found out that the grandparent actually then the story changed, and she wasn't trying to take the child, but she was trying to leave a gift, like she had a Christmas present. So she was trying to give the gift to the child, and we learned very quickly that there was a court order that the grandmother shouldn't have had any contact, not even a gift, with with the child. And so she was trying to go around because she knew the church and she knew how our process and system worked. And, life is full of opportunities and successes. And that was a situation where we definitely looked at it and said, you know what, this is an opportunity for us, because we're not as secure as we could be or should be. And, we took steps from that point forward. About a year later, she tried it again and didn't even get within 50 feet of the children's area. And so that was a situation where everybody was like, well, we trespassed her. She got on the property. And I said, well, that's true. She did come on the property after we trespassed her. But the reality was that we stopped it and we had enough checks and balances from the first event to make a difference and to handle it the right way. So to me, it was definitely a win. And that's how you have to, you have to look at every situation as what can I learn? How can I do a takeaway, and how can I make it better? So, but actually, Mike, do you have a 2-minute?
We're short of time. You know what? I'll change it up and I'll go to a different quick story because of for sake of time here. I'd say, you know what, in the years of doing this, it's not just about the glamorous or in the trenches piece. It's more a behind the scenes learning opportunity. It wasn't an incident. This was more the realization that I had a tendency for taking newbies, green beans that were there for the first Sunday to serve, and I would word vomit. I would put too much on them too quickly because I was just like, you know what, they got to know all this stuff, and I got to get them ready, and I got to get them here, and there's just too much and not enough time, and I got to tell them this, and I got to tell them that, and so you know what it was? It was really the idea that I needed to not just, let them absorb all the different pieces or tell them as I walked around the building, but I needed to really break down and make sure I put guardrails on my own orientation and onboarding processes. And really, in the sense that that's where I got the idea to separate them. To me, I treat orientation as that first day on. There's just acclimating. You're not going to, your goal is not to overwhelm them. Your goal is just to introduce them to people, show them around the building, let them start to absorb, but not overwhelm them. So literally it changed the way I interact with newbies every single time. And then I break out onboarding as a completely separate deliverable, even beyond that. Okay, you've been here for a little bit of time. You've stood post. You've been able to shadow these other people. You've seen what we've done. You've heard us on the radio. What do you have for questions? And I start there. Then I move them into onboarding. And onboarding is really that deeper, hey, what level of skills do you have? Where are you here? How do we get you here? If you haven't done this yet, let me train you. Oh, the last time we did this training, you weren't on yet. We should schedule that next training again so that we get you up to speed on that one. So onboarding really becomes that download of a lot of information, not all in one day, but over a period of time with that person in a very tailored way to that individual. So again, that was the learning opportunity, was don't throw everything at them at day one, break it down, understand and tailor your learning and your training to that individual, because one size doesn't fit all.
That's good.
For sure. So anyhow, well, that's pretty much our time for this broadcast. And so we'll definitely wrap things up. We definitely appreciate Matt. Thanks so much for joining and hanging out with us. And it's been great to have you. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Matt.
And Jared, yes, I'll say thank you. Thanks for hanging out with us, because I know your schedule is crazy too. But it's
Jared,
always
good
fun
to see you, brother.
when you get to.
Yeah, it was great to see you. I was so happy to find when you texted and asked, I was like, I've got a free afternoon. I'm going on the show.
There you go. That's good.
Cool. Well, we will talk to you all next week. I believe we're gonna have another guest on, and we'll be talking about active shooter training, as well as responding to medical situations during that. So you don't want to miss it. We're going to have Aaron Wesley Hanna on, and he was actually with us at the October conference and did a fantastic job. So you don't you don't want to miss it. But until next time, feel free to visit us at churchsafetyguys.com. And you can reach out to us through the website. If we can be of any assistance or help to you in your ministry, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. So until next time, take care. God bless. Have a great rest of your week.
This hour of broadcasting brought to you by TwoWayRadioCenter.com, the Motorola value-added reseller. Church Safety Guys. Thank you for joining the Church Safety Guys broadcast, brought to you by Vigilant Impact. We hope that you found it informative, and we appreciate your feedback and interaction. Be sure to share our broadcast with your teams, join the discussion online, and connect with us on social media. For other great ministry resources, download the Church Security app or at our website at churchsafetyguys.com. Remember, keep a servant's heart, a mindset of ministry, and semper disciplina. Always be training. Have a blessed week.